President Ji-won Kim sat in the Grand Council chamber, watching the alien ambassadors argue about procedures and protocols. She had been sitting in the same chair for 3 years now. 3 long years of meetings, debates, and empty promises. The chamber was a massive sphere that floated in space with seats arranged in circular tiers. Representatives from 47 different alien species filled those seats. They came in all shapes and sizes. Some had scales, others had fur. Some breathed oxygen, others needed special atmosphere suits. But they all had one thing in common. They loved to talk. Ji-won looked at her advisor, Hee-jin Lee, who sat beside her. Hee-jin was typing notes on her datapad, recording every word spoken in the session. Hee-jin still believed in this process. She still thought that if they presented enough evidence, if they made the right arguments, the council would help humanity. Ji-won had stopped believing that 6 months ago. The current speaker was a tall, thin alien with gray skin and 4 arms. He represented the Alhari species, a race known for their philosophy and meditation. He was explaining, for the 3rd time this session, why they needed more time to study the situation. Ji-won had heard this speech before. She had heard it dozens of times. The matter of the human colonies requires careful consideration, the Alhari ambassador said, his voice calm and measured. We cannot rush to judgment. We must examine all perspectives, consider all possibilities. Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. Perhaps the humans provoked this conflict unknowingly. Ji-won felt her jaw tighten. Provoked. They always came back to that word, as if 12 human colonies disappearing was somehow humanity's fault. As if 4 million dead humans were the result of a cultural misunderstanding. Another ambassador stood up. This one was short and round, covered in blue feathers. She represented the Quillan Confederation. I agree with my colleague from Alhari, she chirped. The council has maintained peace for 10,000 years through patience and dialogue. We must not abandon these principles now. I propose we form another investigative committee. Ji-won closed her eyes for a moment. Another committee? That would be the 7th one. The previous 6 had accomplished nothing except generating reports that no one read. Then the Vrelian ambassador rose to speak. Ji-won's eyes snapped open. The Vrelians were the reason humanity was here. They were the ones attacking human colonies. They were the ones killing humans by the millions. The Vrelian ambassador was massive, standing nearly 3 meters tall. His body was covered in thick armored plates that looked like black metal. His face had no nose, just slits for breathing. His eyes glowed red, and when he spoke, rows of sharp teeth became visible. The humans waste the council's time, he said, his voice deep and rumbling. Their colonies were established in territory that the Vrelian collective has claimed for centuries. They are the invaders. We simply defended what is ours. Ji-won wanted to stand up and scream. The colonies had been there for over 50 years. The Vrelians had never claimed that space before. But she stayed seated. She had learned that emotional outbursts only gave the council an excuse to dismiss human concerns. Hee-jin leaned over and whispered, "Don't engage. Let the evidence speak for itself." Ji-won nodded. They had presented their evidence. Surveillance footage of Vrelian warships bombing civilian centers. Testimonies from survivors who watched their families die. Medical records of weapons designed specifically to cause maximum suffering. The council had seen it all, and they had done nothing. The session continued for another 2 hours. Various ambassadors suggested more studies, more committees, more dialogue with the Vrelians. Some suggested that humans should simply abandon their colonies and move elsewhere. A few even suggested that humanity should pay reparations to the Vrelians for the inconvenience. Finally, the council leader called for a vote on the latest proposal. It was a motion to establish yet another investigative committee, one that would spend 6 months studying whether the previous committees had studied the situation correctly. The vote was unanimous. Well, almost unanimous. Ji-won voted against it. But in a council of 47 species, 1 vote meant nothing. As the session ended and the ambassadors began filing out, Ji-won remained seated. She watched them leave, chatting with each other, laughing at private jokes. To them, this was just another day. Another problem to be studied and discussed and delayed. We should head back to our quarters, Hee-jin said softly. Get some rest before tomorrow's session. Ji-won shook her head. Tomorrow will be the same as today, and the day after that will be the same as tomorrow. They're never going to help us, Hee-jin. We have to keep trying. Diplomacy takes time. We don't have time. Jiwon's voice rose, echoing in the nearly empty chamber. While we sit here talking, humans are dying. Every day more colonies go silent. Every day more families are destroyed. Hee-jin looked uncomfortable. What else can we do? If we act outside the council's authority, we'll be condemned as warmongers. We'll lose what little support we have. Jiwon stood up and walked to the chamber's transparent wall. Outside, she could see the stars. Somewhere out there in the darkness, human colonies were under attack. People were calling for help. And their president was sitting in a comfortable chair, listening to aliens debate procedure. Her communicator buzzed. It was a secure channel from Earth. Admiral Do-hyun Park's face appeared on the small screen. President Kim, he said, his expression grave. We've lost contact with Colony Sejong. Jiwon felt her stomach drop. Sejong was one of humanity's largest colonies. Over 4 million people lived there when, she asked, 3 hours ago. All communications went dead simultaneously. We're sending scout ships, but based on previous patterns, we know what happened. Jiwon nodded slowly. She did know. The Vrelians had attacked. By now, everyone in Sejong was probably dead. 4 million more names to add to the list. What are your orders, Madam President? Do-hyun asked. Jiwon looked back at the empty council chamber. At the seats where aliens sat and talked and debated while humans died. She thought about the 3 years she had spent here. 3 years of patience. 3 years of following the rules. 3 years of hoping that civilization and justice would prevail. Stand by, Admiral, she said quietly. Things are about to change. She ended the call and turned to Hee-jin. Get me a meeting with Secretary General Taewon, and contact our intelligence officers. I want everything we have on Vrelian military capabilities, everything. Hee-jin's eyes widened. Jiwon, what are you planning? President Kim looked out at the stars again. Somewhere out there, the Vrelians were celebrating another easy victory. They thought humans were weak. They thought humans would just keep talking forever. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I'm planning to save humanity, Jiwon said, even if the council won't. Commander Yuna Kang stumbled off the transport ship, her uniform torn and stained with blood. Some of it was hers. Most of it belonged to people she had tried to save. People she had failed to save. The council station's docking bay was clean and bright, so different from the hell she had just escaped. Medical personnel rushed forward, but she waved them away. I need to see President Kim, Yuna said, her voice hoarse from screaming. Now. Within 30 minutes, she was sitting in a secure briefing room. President Ji-won Kim sat across from her, along with Hee-jin Lee and a man Yuna recognized from news broadcasts. Secretary General Taewon Shin, the leader of Earth's government. Also present was Dr. Sunho Bayek, a xenobiologist who specialized in studying alien species. Tell us what happened at Sejong, Ji-won said gently. Yuna closed her eyes, but that only made the memories more vivid. She opened them again and began to speak. The Vrelian fleet arrived without warning. 40 warships. They didn't demand surrender. They didn't make any announcements. They just started firing on the cities. She pulled out a data chip from her pocket. Her hands were shaking. I managed to save some recordings before the communications array was destroyed. You need to see this. Dr. Sunho took the chip and loaded it into the room's display system. The holographic screen lit up with images that made even Ji-won, a former military strategist, feel sick. The footage showed Sejong's capital city burning. Vrelian ground forces moved through the streets, but they weren't fighting soldiers. They were rounding up civilians, men, women, children, herding them into massive transport containers. What are they doing? Taewon asked, though his expression suggested he didn't want to know the answer. Watch, Yuna whispered. The footage continued. The containers were loaded onto Vrelian ships, but some civilians were separated from the others. They were taken to what looked like medical facilities. Vrelian technicians, wearing protective gear, began conducting experiments. The screams that came through the audio feed made Hee-jin turn away. They're harvesting us, Yuna said flatly. Studying human biology, testing different weapons and toxins on living subjects, seeing how much pain we can endure before we die. Dr. Sunho paused the footage and enhanced a section of the image. He pointed to symbols on the Vrelian equipment. These markings indicate this is a standard procedure for them. This isn't a new operation. They've done this before. How many times? Jiwan asked. Sunho pulled up another file on the display. I've been researching Vrelian history. Over the past 2,000 years, 7 different species have encountered the Vrelians and then disappeared from galactic records. The Council assumed these species went extinct naturally or simply left known space, but I think the Vrelians wiped them out. Taewon leaned forward. Why would they do this? What's their purpose? Resources, Sunho explained. The Vrelians view other intelligent species as resources. They study them, harvest biological materials, use them for labor or experiments. To them, we're no different than livestock. Jiwan felt cold rage building in her chest. Does the Council know about this? They must, Sunho said. The pattern is obvious once you look for it, but acknowledging it would mean admitting they've allowed genocide to happen under their watch for millennia. It's easier to pretend each case is an isolated incident or a misunderstanding. Yuna spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. I watched children being loaded into those containers. Families separated. A mother was begging them to take her instead of her daughter. They shot the mother and took the daughter anyway. Tears streamed down her face. I couldn't save any of them. I could only run and hide and record what was happening. Jiwan reached across and squeezed Yuna's shoulder. You did save them, by bringing us this evidence, by making sure the galaxy knows what the Vrelians really are. Will it matter? Yuna asked. Will the Council actually do something now? Before Jiwan could answer, Admiral Do-hyun Park's face appeared on another communication screen. He looked grim. Madam President, our intelligence has detected a massive Vrelian fleet mobilizing in their home system. Over 500 warships. Based on their trajectory calculations, they're preparing to strike at the core worlds. Earth? Taewon asked, his face going pale. Earth, Do-hyun confirmed. And the other major human colonies. They're not just taking border worlds anymore. They're preparing for a full invasion. Jiwan stood up and paced the room. How long do we have? 3 months, maybe 4. But Madam President, there's something else you should know. Do-hyun paused, choosing his words carefully. While you've been negotiating here, I've been preparing the fleet. We've been studying Vrelian tactics, developing new weapons, training for combat. We knew this day might come. Taewon looked shocked. You've been preparing for war? Without authorization? With my authorization, Jiwan said quietly. I ordered Do-hyun to make ready 6 months ago. I hoped we wouldn't need it. I hoped the Council would act. But I wasn't going to let humanity be caught defenseless. Hyejin, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. If we fight outside of Council authority, we'll be condemned. Every species in the galaxy will turn against us. They've already turned against us, Yuna said bitterly. They just use prettier words about it. Jiwan walked back to the table and looked at each person in the room. I'm calling an emergency council session tomorrow. I'm going to present all of this evidence, the footage from Sejong, Sunho's research about the extinct species, intelligence about the coming invasion. I'll give them one last chance to act. And if they don't? Taewon asked. Jiwan's expression hardened. Then humanity acts alone. The next day, the council chamber was packed. Word had spread that Earth's president was calling an emergency session, and everyone wanted to see what would happen. Jiwon walked to the center speaking platform, with Hyejin beside her carrying data files. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Jiwon began. I come before you today with new evidence about the Vrelian attacks on human colonies. She played the footage from Sejong. The chamber fell silent as the images showed the brutal reality of what was happening to humans. When the screams of the test subjects echoed through the chamber, several ambassadors looked away. Then she presented Sunho's research about the 7 extinct species. She showed the patterns, the similarities, the undeniable conclusion. The Vrelians are not simply conquering territory, Jiwan said, her voice clear and strong. They are committing genocide. They have done it before, and they are doing it now to humanity, and they will do it to others if we don't stop them. Finally, she revealed the intelligence about the coming invasion. In 3 months, maybe less, A Vrelian fleet will attack Earth, our homeworld, the birthplace of our species. They will do to 8 billion humans what they did to 4 million at Sejong, unless we act now. She finished her presentation and waited. The council leader, an ancient alien who looked like a floating jellyfish, spoke in a wheezing voice. This is indeed disturbing information. We must form a special committee to verify these claims and investigate the proper response. Such an inquiry will require proper procedures. We estimate 6 to 8 months for a thorough investigation. Jiwon felt something break inside her. Not her spirit, but her patience, her willingness to play by rules that were designed to prevent action rather than enable it. 6 to 8 months, she repeated slowly. Earth will be ashes in 6 to 8 months. Then perhaps, the Vrelian ambassador said, standing up with a cruel smile, humans should accept their place in the natural order. Some species are predators, some are prey. It is not personal, President Kim. It is simply nature. Jiwon looked at the ambassador. Then she looked at all the other ambassadors in the chamber, at the species who had sat and watched 7 civilizations die, who were preparing to watch an 8th. She thought about Yuna's testimony, about the children loaded into containers, about the mother shot while begging for her daughter's life, about 4 million dead at Sejong and 8 billion more on a countdown to extinction, and she made her decision. I need to make a call, Jiwon said. She turned and walked toward the exit. President Kim, the council leader called out, we are not finished with this session. Jiwon stopped and looked back. Yes, you are. You've been finished for a long time. You just didn't know it yet. Jiwon stood in her private quarters on the council station, looking at 3 faces on separate communication screens. Admiral Do-Yun Park, representing the military, Secretary General Tae-Won Shin, representing Earth's civilian government, and Captain Min-Ho Choi, commander of humanity's flagship, the ESS Indomitable. They voted for another investigation committee, Jiwon said simply, 6 to 8 months. The Vrelian ambassador practically admitted they're planning genocide, and the council's response is to form another committee. Tae-Won rubbed his tired eyes. What are our options? We have 2, Do-Hyun said. We can wait for the council to act, which means waiting until we're extinct. Or we can defend ourselves. Defending ourselves means going to war without council approval, Tae-Won pointed out. That's never been done in 10,000 years of council history. We'll be labeled as warmongers, barbarians. Other species might even join the Vrelians against us. Let them, Captain Min-Ho said quietly. He was a young officer, barely 30, but he had seen combat at the border colonies. I'd rather die fighting than wait to be harvested like cattle. Jiwon closed her eyes and took a deep breath. This was the moment. The decision that would define humanity's future. Either they would remain part of a system that didn't protect them, or they would stand alone. Admiral Do-Hyun, she said, opening her eyes. Is the fleet ready? Yes, Madam President. 140 warships. It's not many compared to the Vrelian forces, but every ship has been modified with new weapon systems. We've been training for 3 years. The crews are ready. Secretary General Tae-Won, what about civilian morale? Tae-Won was quiet for a moment. When news of Sejong reached Earth, there were protests. Not against the government, against the council. People are demanding action. Military recruitment centers have lines around the block. Civilians are volunteering to help with defense preparations. If you decide to fight, the people will support you. Jiwon nodded slowly. She looked at each face on the screens. These were good people. Brave people. They deserve better than a president who let them die because she was afraid of making hard choices. Hyejin, Jiwon called out. Her advisor emerged from the next room where she had been listening. I know what you're going to say, Hyejin said quietly. And I know you're right. I've spent my whole career believing in diplomatic solutions. But diplomacy only works when both sides want peace. The Vrelians don't want peace. They want prey. Jiwon felt grateful for her advisor's understanding. Then we're all agreed? Yeah, Do-Hyun said firmly. Yes, Min-Ho echoed. Yes, Tae-Won said, though he looked sad. May history forgive us for what we're about to do. History is written by survivors, Jiwon said. Let's make sure we survive to write it. The next morning, Jiwon requested an emergency session of the full council. The ambassadors gathered, expecting another plea for help. Instead, they got something they had never seen before in 10,000 years. Jiwan walked to the center platform, but this time she wore her old military uniform instead of diplomatic robes. Heejin stood beside her, also in uniform. The symbolism was not lost on anyone in the chamber. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Jiwan began. I stand before you today not to ask for help, but to make an announcement. After 3 years of negotiation, after presenting overwhelming evidence of genocide, after watching 12 human colonies destroyed and millions of my people killed, I have reached a conclusion. She paused, looking around at all the alien faces watching her. Some looked curious. Some looked annoyed. The Vrelian ambassador looked amused. The conclusion is this, Jiwan continued, her voice growing stronger. The Galactic Council is not a force for peace. It is a force for inaction. It protects the strong and abandons the weak. It makes pretty speeches about justice while innocent people die. Murmurs began to spread through the chamber. The council leader tried to interrupt, but Jiwan kept speaking. You voted yesterday for another investigation. 6 to 8 months, you said. But you know what will happen in 6 to 8 months? Earth will be attacked. 8 billion humans will face the same fate as the people of Sejong, and you will form another committee to investigate that too. President Kim, this is inappropriate, the council leader wheezed. You must respect the procedures. I respect procedures that achieve results, Jiwan said coldly. Yours only achieved delay, so I'm done waiting. She reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a small device. With a press of her thumb, a holographic document appeared in the air above the platform. It bore the seals of Earth's government and the signatures of its leaders. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council. The chamber erupted. Ambassadors shouted. Some in shock, others in outrage. The council leader banged a gavel-like device, trying to restore order. But Jiwan wasn't finished. Furthermore, she continued, her voice cutting through the noise, Earth hereby declares itself in a state of war with the Vrelian collective. We will defend our colonies. We will defend our homeworld. We will use any and all means necessary to ensure our survival. The Vrelian ambassador stood up laughing. You declare war on us? With your tiny fleet? With your soft bodies and weak technology? You are amusing, President Kim. Your species will be extinct within months. Jiwan turned to face him directly. You've been at war with us for 3 years. You just called it conquest and we called it diplomacy. But let me be very clear about something. When a human stops talking and starts fighting, you should have listened while they were still willing to talk. She turned back to the council. You're all so proud of your 10,000 years of peace. But it's not real peace. It's just the silence of victims who are too afraid to scream. Well, humanity is done being silent. This is barbarism, another ambassador shouted. Warmongering. No, Jiwan said quietly. This is survival. We're not attacking anyone except those who attacked us first. We're not conquering anyone's territory. We're simply defending ourselves. If the council had done its job, this wouldn't be necessary. But you didn't, so we will. She began walking toward the exit. Heejin followed her. The chamber was in chaos now, with ambassadors arguing with each other, some calling for humanity to be sanctioned, others demanding more investigation. At the doorway, Jiwan stopped and looked back one final time. I came to this council 3 years ago hoping for allies. I'm leaving today with enemies and indifferent strangers. But I'm also leaving with something else. I'm leaving with purpose, she touched her communicator. Admiral Do-Yun, you have authorization. Engage the enemy at will. On the screen in the chamber, visible to all the ambassadors, Do-Hyun's face appeared. He saluted. Yes, Madam President. The fleet is moving out. Jiwan ended the transmission and spoke her final words to the council. Enough talking. Let's start the war, she walked out. Behind her, the council chamber erupted into arguments that would last for hours. But Jiwan wasn't listening anymore. She was already thinking about the future, about the battles to come, about whether humanity would survive. In her quarters, she found messages flooding in from Earth, citizens cheering, military personnel pledging their support, colony governors promising to stand firm. For 3 years, humans had felt helpless. Now they felt something else. They felt like fighters. Captain Minho sent a message from the Indomitable. Madam President, the fleet is en route to New Busan Colony. Intelligence suggests that's where the Vrelians will strike next. We'll be there first. Make them remember us, Captain, Jiwan replied. Oh, they'll remember, Minho promised. The whole galaxy will remember. Hyejin sat down beside Ji-won, both of them exhausted. We just changed everything, Hyejin said softly. Yes, Ji-won agreed. For better or worse, the galaxy will never look at humanity the same way again. Do you think we made the right choice? Ji-won thought about the children in the containers at Sejong, about the 7 extinct species that no one remembered, about the 8 billion people on Earth who were counting on her to keep them alive. I think we made the only choice, she said. Now we have to make sure it was the right one. Across the galaxy, news of humanity's declaration spread like wildfire. Some species were shocked. Some were afraid. Some secretly admired humanity's courage. And the Vrelians? They were preparing their fleets, confident that this would be humanity's last stand. They had no idea what was coming. Captain Minho Choi stood on the bridge of the ESS Indomitable, watching the sensor displays. Around his flagship, 140 human warships moved in formation. It was humanity's entire military fleet. Every ship they had, every trained crew, everything they could throw at the Vrelians. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. Contact in 30 minutes, his tactical officer reported. Vrelian fleet composition, 215 warships. They outgun us 5-1. Minho nodded calmly, though his heart was racing. This was it. The first real battle of humanity's war. Everything they had prepared for during 3 years of endless council meetings. Signal all ships, he ordered. Battle formation Delta, and open a channel to the fleet. A moment later, he was speaking to every human captain, every crew member, every soldier preparing for combat. This is Captain Choi. In a few minutes, we're going to meet the Vrelian fleet. They think we're easy prey. They think we'll run or beg for mercy. They're wrong. He paused, looking at his own crew. Young men and women who had volunteered to stand between monsters and their homes. We've been talking for 3 years. Today we show them what happens when humans stop talking. Today we fight. For Sejong, for all the colonies we've lost. For Earth, make every shot count. Make every ship we lose take 3 of theirs with it. And remember, the galaxy is watching. Show them what humanity is made of. The crew cheered. Across the fleet, similar cheers echoed on every bridge and every gun deck and every fighter bay. 3 years of frustration and helplessness were being transformed into determination. Enemy fleet emerging from hyperspace, sensors reported. On the main display, Vrelian warships appeared. They were massive vessels, dark and angular, covered in armor plating. They moved in a confident, almost lazy formation. They had no reason to fear humanity's small fleet. That was their first mistake. All ships execute attack pattern Omega, Minho ordered. Show them something they've never seen before. The human fleet suddenly broke formation. Instead of staying in a defensive cluster, they scattered in all directions. The Vrelians, expecting a conventional battle, hesitated for just a moment, trying to understand the tactic. That hesitation cost them. Captain Yoonji Nam was piloting the ESS Retribution, humanity's prototype warship. It was smaller than the other vessels, but packed with experimental weapons that engineer Yaesung-oh had spent 3 years developing. Weapons the Council would have called unnecessarily aggressive. Weapons designed by humans who knew they were fighting for survival. Targeting their command ship, Yoonji said calmly to her crew. Firing mass driver. The mass driver was simple but devastating. It accelerated a solid metal projectile to a significant fraction of light speed. No shields could stop it because it wasn't energy. It was matter moving at incredible velocity. The projectile hit the Vrelian command ship's bridge at relativistic speeds. The entire front section of the ship simply ceased to exist, vaporized by the impact. Direct hit, her tactical officer confirmed. Target destroyed. Across the battlefield, other human ships were demonstrating what 3 years of preparation meant. Admiral Doyen had used the time well. Every weapon was optimized for maximum damage. Every tactic was designed to offset humanity's numerical disadvantage. The Vrelians adapted quickly. They were experienced warriors. They began targeting human ships systematically, using their superior numbers. The ESS Dauntless took multiple hits and began venting atmosphere. Its captain, refusing to abandon ship, turned his dying vessel toward a Vrelian cruiser and engaged the engines at full power. The collision destroyed both ships, but the human crew had chosen their target well. The Vrelian cruiser had been coordinating an attack on 3 other human vessels. With it gone, those ships survived. We're losing ships, Minho's tactical officer reported. 7 destroyed, 14 heavily damaged. And how many have they lost? Minho asked. 23 destroyed, another 30 damaged and retreating. Minho allowed himself a tight smile. They were outnumbered 5-1, but they were taking down 3 Vrelian ships for every human loss. Better than anyone had hoped. But it still wasn't good enough to win. On the surface of New Busan Colony, General Kiho Song watched the battle in orbit through long-range sensors. He commanded the ground defense forces. If the fleet failed, if the Vrelians landed troops, he would be the last line of defense for 3 million colonists. General, we're detecting Vrelian landing craft breaking off from the main fleet, his aide reported. How many? 50. They're heading for the capital city. Kiho nodded. The Vrelians were trying to force humanity to split its focus, fight in space and on the ground simultaneously. It was a smart tactic, but humans had prepared for this too. Activate the surface batteries, he ordered, and tell the civilian militia to get to their positions. If those landing craft make it through, we'll show them what an angry human with a gun can do. The surface-to-orbit batteries opened fire. They were massive railguns built during the 3 years of preparation. They couldn't help much in a ship-to-ship battle, but they were perfect for targeting landing craft. 30 of the 50 Vrelian craft were destroyed before they reached the atmosphere. The remaining 20 made it to the surface, but they landed in kill zones. Humanity had been preparing these defenses for months. Kiho personally led a counterattack on one landing site. The Vrelians were fierce fighters, but they had never faced humans defending their homes before. Every citizen of New Busan had been trained. Every building in the capital had been fortified. The Vrelians found themselves fighting not just soldiers, but shopkeepers with rifles, teachers with explosives, children who knew how to set ambushes. Back in orbit, Minho watched his fleet's numbers dwindle. They were down to 90 operational ships, but the Vrelians were down to 80. The numbers were getting better, but time was running out. Captain, his science officer called out, I'm detecting something strange about the Vrelian ships. Their coordination is dropping. Response times are slower. Dr. Sunho Bayek, who was aboard the Indomitable as an observer, suddenly spoke up. Captain, I may know why. The Vrelians rely heavily on pheromone communication for tactical coordination. If we could disrupt that, can we? Minho interrupted. I've been working on a biological agent. It's harmless to humans, but would interfere with Vrelian sensory organs. If we could deploy it across the battlefield, do it, Minho ordered. We'll cover you. The Indomitable and 5 escort ships broke formation and accelerated toward the center of the Vrelian fleet. It was a suicide mission and everyone knew it. But if Sunho's agent worked, it could turn the battle. Lieutenant Bora Im, a young tactical officer on the Indomitable's bridge, coordinated the defensive fire. She was brilliant at her job, keeping enemy missiles at bay while the science team prepared the deployment. Several times Vrelian weapons fire came dangerously close, but Bora's calculations were perfect. Agent deployed, Sunho announced. At first, nothing happened. Then the Vrelian formation began to fall apart. Ships stopped coordinating. Some fired on their own vessels by mistake. The rigid military discipline that made them dangerous was crumbling as their communication system failed. All ships press the attack, Minho shouted into the fleet channel. Hit them now while they're confused. The human fleet, despite being bloodied and battered, surged forward. They had been on the defensive for 3 years. Now finally they were the ones attacking. All the frustration, all the anger, all the grief for lost colonies poured into their assault. Captain Yunji and the Retribution destroyed 4 more Vrelian ships, her experimental weapons proving their worth. Other captains, seeing her success, adopted similar aggressive tactics. The Vrelians, unable to coordinate their response, began to retreat. They're running, the tactical officer said, disbelief in his voice. Don't let them escape, Minho ordered. Chase them down. Make them pay for every human life they took. But even in victory, the cost was clear. 48 human ships had been destroyed, thousands of crew members dead. On New Busan's surface, General Kiho's forces had lost 2,000 soldiers and 500 civilians, stopping the Vrelian landing force. As the last Vrelian ships jumped to hyperspace, fleeing the battlefield, Minho received a transmission from Admiral Do-hyun, who had been coordinating from Earth. Status report, Captain. We held, sir. New Busan is secure. Vrelian fleet retreated with heavy losses. There was a long pause. Then Do-hyun's voice came back and it sounded different, proud, relieved. You did it. Against 5-1 odds, you won. Minho looked around his bridge at the exhausted but triumphant crew. No, sir, we all did it. Every ship, every soldier, every civilian who refused to give up. News of the victory at New Busan spread across human space within hours. Colonies that had been preparing to evacuate now stood firm. Civilians who had been afraid now felt hope. And across the galaxy, other species who had been watching began to reassess their opinion of humanity. The humans hadn't just talked about fighting back. They had actually done it. And won. But Jiwon, watching the reports from the council station, knew this was just the beginning. The Vrelians had retreated, but they hadn't surrendered. And now they knew humanity was a real threat. The real war was about to begin. The victory at New Busan lasted exactly 6 days. Then Vrelian revenge came. Admiral Do-Yun Park sat in his command center on Earth, watching real-time intelligence reports. His face was grim. The Vrelians had gathered their main armada, pulling ships from across their empire. 500 warships were heading directly for Earth. Not colonies, not outposts. Humanity's homeworld. How long? He asked his intelligence officer Yuna Kang, who had joined his staff after surviving Sejong. 72 hours, Yuna replied. They're not hiding their approach. They want us to know they're coming. They want us to be afraid. Do-Hyun looked at the numbers again. After the Battle of New Busan, humanity had 92 operational warships left. Many were damaged and undergoing repairs. Against 500 Vrelian ships, the odds were impossible. Get me President Kim, he ordered. Jiwon appeared on the communication screen. She was still at the council station, though she no longer attended their sessions. Behind her, Do-Hyun could see Hyejin working at a terminal, trying to build support among the few species who seemed sympathetic to humanity. I saw the reports, Jiwon said before Do-Hyun could speak. 500 ships. Yes, Madam President. Every ship we have is moving to Earth's defense, but we're outnumbered more than 5-1. And this time we won't have the element of surprise. Jiwon was quiet for a moment. Do-Hyun could see the weight of command on her face. She had started this war. She had made the choice to fight. Now Earth itself would pay the price. What are our chances? She asked. Do-Hyun had never lied to his president. He wasn't about to start now. Honestly, almost zero. We can make them pay for every meter of space, but we can't win. Not with conventional tactics. Then we'll use unconventional tactics, Jiwon said firmly. Admiral, I'm authorizing any and all measures necessary to defend Earth. Deploy every experimental weapon. Use any tactic, no matter how desperate. We didn't come this far to surrender now. After the call ended, Do-Hyun gathered his command staff. Captain Minho Choi, promoted after New Busan, was there. So was Captain Yoonji Nam, whose retribution had been the most effective ship in the battle. General Kiho Song, brought from New Busan to help coordinate Earth's ground defenses. Engineer Jae-sung, ready to deploy his most experimental and dangerous weapons. And Dr. Sunho Baek, who had been studying Vrelian biology with obsessive intensity. We have 72 hours to prepare for a battle we can't win, Do-Hyun said bluntly. I need ideas, anything, everything, Sunho spoke first. The biological agent I used at New Busan disrupted their coordination. But I've discovered something else about Vrelian biology. They have a neural link that connects ships in their fleet. It's how they coordinate so perfectly. If we could overload that link, what would happen? Minho asked. Best case? We cause confusion and pain, making them less effective. Worst case? We trigger a feedback loop that could disable their entire fleet. How do we deliver it? Yoonji asked. Sunho hesitated. Someone would have to get close to their command ship. Very close. Upload a modified version of the agent directly into their systems. Everyone in the room understood what that meant. A suicide mission? I'll do it, Minho said immediately. No, Do-Hyun replied. I will. The room went silent. Minho started to protest, but Do-Hyun held up a hand. You're the best tactical commander we have. The fleet needs you, but this mission needs someone expendable. You're the admiral, Minho began. And I'm making this an order, Do-Hyun said quietly. Besides, I'm old. I've had a good life. You all have futures ahead of you. Let me make sure you get to see them. Before anyone could argue further, alarms blared. Yuna rushed in, her face pale. Sir, the Vrelians have accelerated their approach. They'll be here in 24 hours, not 72. They must have detected our preparations, Kiho said. They're not giving us time to set up. Do-hyun made his decision. Then we move now. Sunho, prepare the agent. I'll take a stealth ship and get as close as possible to their command vessel. The rest of the fleet will engage them in conventional combat, draw their attention. It's not enough time, Jae-sung protested. We haven't even tested half the new weapons. Then we'll test them in combat, Do-hyun said. We're out of time for caution. 20 hours later, the Vrelian armada entered the Sol system. They came in a massive formation, 500 ships moving with perfect coordination. They ignored the outer planets, heading straight for Earth. The human fleet waited in orbit around Earth. 92 ships against 500. Behind them, the blue and green planet they were sworn to protect. 8 billion people looking up at the stars, knowing their fate was being decided in the darkness above. Do-hyun sat alone in his small stealth ship, watching the Vrelian fleet approach. The vessel was barely armed, designed for infiltration rather than combat. If his plan failed, he wouldn't even be able to fight back. Admiral, you're cleared for approach, Minho's voice came through the comm. The captain was now in command of the Indomitable and the entire fleet. Good luck, sir. Take care of them, Minho, Do-hyun replied. All of them. Make sure humanity remembers this day. He cut the connection and began his approach using every stealth technology humanity had developed. The Vrelians were focused on the human fleet ahead of them. They didn't notice one small ship slipping through their formation. The battle began with a fury that shook the solar system. Human ships, knowing they had nothing to lose, fought with reckless courage. They rammed Vrelian vessels. They detonated their own reactors to damage enemy ships. They refused to retreat, refused to surrender, refused to die quietly. Captain Yoonji and the Retribution unleashed every experimental weapon Jae-sung had created. Some worked brilliantly, others failed catastrophically. But she kept firing, kept fighting, kept making the Vrelians pay. On Earth's surface, General Kehoe had prepared a defense that would have seemed insane under normal circumstances. Every major city had been fortified. Civilian shelters doubled as weapons depots. If the Vrelians made it past the fleet, they would face 8 billion angry humans with nothing left to lose. In orbit, Lieutenant Bora Im, now promoted to tactical coordinator for the entire fleet, managed an impossible task. She was coordinating 92 ships against 500, adjusting tactics in real time, finding weaknesses in the Vrelian formation. Her brilliance kept the human fleet alive far longer than anyone had predicted, but it still wasn't enough. Human ships were being destroyed. The Indomitable took a direct hit that killed half the crew. Yoonji's Retribution lost its main weapons, forcing her to ram enemy vessels. The human line was breaking. Then Admiral Do-hyun reached the Vrelian command ship. He attached his vessel to their hull using magnetic clamps. Vrelian security systems detected him immediately, but too late. He activated Sunho's biological agent and uploaded it directly into their systems. For a moment, nothing happened. Do-hyun watched the timer count down, wondering if he had failed. Then the Vrelian command ship began to convulse. The neural link that connected their entire fleet was overloading. His ship exploded as Vrelian weapons fire destroyed it. But the damage was done. Across the Vrelian fleet, ships began losing coordination. The perfect formation fell apart. Captains, connected by the neural link, felt the feedback from the command ship. Pain, confusion, disruption spread through the entire armada. All ships, attack now, Minho shouted. They're vulnerable. The human fleet, battered but unbroken, surged forward. They targeted the confused Vrelian vessels with everything they had left. Ships that had been holding back their last missiles, saving their final shots, now unleashed everything at once. The tide turned. Vrelian ships, unable to coordinate, began firing on each other. Their rigid command structure, designed for perfect efficiency, became a weakness when that efficiency shattered. The neural link that made them powerful was now destroying them from within. Earth's ground batteries joined the fight. Massive railguns fired into space, targeting Vrelian vessels that strayed too close. Even civilian ships, cargo haulers, and mining vessels armed themselves with whatever weapons they could find and joined the battle. The Vrelians, for the first time in their species' history, felt something they had never experienced before. Fear. They had conquered dozens of species. They had won hundreds of battles. But they had never faced an enemy like humanity. An enemy that refused to give up. An enemy that would rather die fighting than live as prey. The Vrelian fleet broke. Some ships tried to retreat. Others continued fighting in confused clusters. A few even surrendered, something their species had never done before. Captain Minho, now commanding from the heavily damaged Indomitable, made a decision. Signal the retreating vessels. Tell them we're willing to accept their surrender. Tell them the killing can stop if they wanted to. The Vrelian Second Admiral, who had assumed command when the command ship was destroyed, appeared on screen. His red eyes showed something that looked almost like respect. "You have defeated us," he said simply. "We surrender. We will withdraw from all human territories. We will pay reparations. We will submit to your war crime tribunals." The Vrelian Admiral looked at the wreckage surrounding Earth. Hundreds of destroyed ships from both sides, the planet below still intact but scarred. The human fleet reduced to 38 operational vessels but still fighting.